Dan the Artman's Book Reviews, Episode 80, On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness, by Andrew Peterson. Well, it took a while to get going, but man, did I love this book. I think the reason it may take readers a bit to get into it is its greatest strength. It is different than most books. It has awesome secrets and cool bad guys and a fun story world, but it's also goofy. If you feel like you're not getting this book yet, just keep reading. I was richly rewarded for it. That said, I enjoyed this book a lot and found it humorous and quaint, but man, once things started really going down, I was so hooked. The other thing I loved about this book was the poetic prose. The silly stuff is all mixed in with beautiful, epic writing you might find in a poem, but it was not purple prose that ever pulled me out of the story, just the opposite. When grand things in the story were being described or spoken of, the language became higher. And when it was normal, everyday stuff, the humor will have you and your kids loving it. I've read in some reviews that the sense of humor didn't work for them in this book, but it worked for me, and I think my kids will love it too. The way this book ended had me enjoying every word. The way the environment and how the characters felt in it, and the unfolding of bigger things in the world, no spoilers here. By the end of the book, I had fallen in love with it. I can't wait to read it again with the new knowledge of the story world I have. This is a bit strange, but I think the other reason I really connected with this book is because I have a lot in common with the author and the things he likes. I recently read his somewhat autobiographical book on being a creator called Adorning the Dark, and it was like reading about me in many ways. So yeah, when authors write a story they would love, in this case, it worked well for me. I loved this story and the things in it I could pick up on, like the author's love for books and fantastical tales and diction that flows off the tongue in a way that brings beauty to the ears. Lastly, although some of the action felt a lot darker and a bit abrupt from how the book felt at first, it was great and added a lot to the story, as you could feel the character's world getting scarier and the stakes much higher. I really enjoyed this read. Awesome. Man, this is another instance where, just like Mrs. Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, I read the first book in a series. I loved it. I was super excited to read the next book in the series, and somehow I still haven't done that. But I think that's because I read way too many books at a time. There are some benefits to that. I've been reading a lot about this in different articles and stuff online, but if you can read multiple books at once, it's a great way to do more reading throughout the year. Because let's say you're trying to read a really good book, but it's kind of dense, and it takes a lot of effort to get through it, maybe nonfiction, maybe some classic literature, and instead of stopping your reading, maybe you switch to something that's much lighter, like a thriller or some fiction or whatever it is. And in that way, instead of not reading anymore for that day, you just switch to something else. And for me, I have paperbacks and then a lot more ebooks and then mostly audiobooks I'm listening to and then some comics I'm reading. So I never get the stories that I'm reading mixed up. The narratives are always different. Like there's a fantasy one and a sci-fi one and some nonfiction and all kinds of different books. So I never get them mixed up. That's never been a problem. And I don't tend to forget where I left off when I pick a book back up if it's been a little while. But I think that is the problem. If I'm reading literally like 8 to 11 books at a time, which is pretty common for me, kind of ridiculous, I tend to not get back to some of the other books as soon as I should. And then if I'm reading like the first book in a series, I probably started the first book in 2 other series, is that how you say that? At the same time. And that's not good. I need to whittle down my reading list to maybe like 3 books, and then just focus on one series at a time until I finish it. And even then, if I finish a book in a series, I could take a break with one palate cleanser of some other book, but then keep going. So it's all fresh in my mind, because I really want to finish all of these different book series. But I think I'm just like a child. I hear about some other cool book and I'm like, maybe I'll start it. And then I start it and I like it and I'm reading it, and it's then the 11th book in my list of books I'm currently reading, and it's kind of ridiculous. So anyway, none of that is about this book that I just reviewed, but I've been just trying to include more stuff about the reading life, maybe, or books, or being an author or writer. So it's just something that's been on my mind a lot lately that I thought I would share, as once again I'm reading about a book that was incredible, and I really was so excited to read the second one in the series, because everything gets way more intense, the world gets way bigger, there are mysteries that become revealed about characters that blow your mind, and you're like, okay, I have to know more about this. And yet, so many other books on my reading list must have clogged it out, and then I just didn't pick the second book up. Tragic. So I'm going to work on that. You work on reading more yourself, and that's all I've got for you this week. But I'll see you next time, and in the meantime, happy reading.
This podcast is brought to you by dandantheartman.com, where you can find more book reviews, entries on Dan's writing journey, and links to purchase Dan's books, like Haunted House Flipper or The Case of the Missing Snowman. Music by Dan Absalonson.